you doing, guys? Today we're going to start digging into the Seniors Wisconsin AEN. Now this is the original engine to the tractor. It's not in bad shape physically. Visually it looks like hell, but we got all the parts, or most of the parts that we need in order to get this thing all back up and running. We are going to do a full rebuild on this engine. Usually I do, like I'll hone a block, or like the last aluminum block Briggs I did is I bored it with the hone. Not doing any of that stuff. This engine will get dropped off to a machine shop. I'll have them actually bore it 10. And I might have them cut the valve seats. I don't know. I might do that myself. But in general, this is going to get a full rebuild. I went ahead and I took the clutch off. I thought I was going to be able to get the clutch back on, but I'll explain that in 1 second, but I wasn't able to. So I'm going to have to show it to you, kind of an exploded view here on the floor. Now, the reason why I can't get the flywheel back onto the crank is because I had used a steering wheel puller, and that just gently drew the flywheel off of the crankshaft. You can see that's the PTO right there. And it's just so tight to put it back on. I just don't want to force it back on right this second. But essentially, that is the PTO coming out of the engine. You can see that it is keyed for it looks like a 1/4 inch key. It does have a bronze bushing as the pilot bearing in the end of the crank, and then it's threaded. The actual thread style I don't know off the top of my head, but that's what that looks like. And obviously the flywheel on there, and then there's this big nut and a lock washer that holds the whole thing together. These 6 bolts that are in the flywheel itself are the 6 bolts that correspond with the pressure plate. And there's my pressure plate, not in bad shape. The flywheel's not in bad shape either. This is an 8.5 inch 10 spline clutch disc. I was looking online to see if I can find another, at least to replace the clutch disc, but I haven't had any success. It is an old Rebestis, and it does have some numbers that you can see. I'll have to work on that and see what all that is about. But in general, that's the clutch. That's the whole clutch setup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bang these 4 bolts off right there. Take the bell housing and off the engine, because I'm not going to need that for the rebuild, so to speak. And then take all these clutch parts and the bell housing and go put them over on my shelf. That way, nothing gets damaged. Gas tank is off, head's off. We take a look at the bore. The bore is in really good shape. There's no scores. It's all glazed over. It is standard. I have a 10 over piston and ring set for it, so I'm going to have it bored 10. I got a little nervous there for a second, because when I looked at the top of the piston, it didn't say standard or anything like that. I was like, what the heck? So I went downstairs, got my 10 over piston, and it doesn't fit. So I'll be able to sleep tonight, thank God. But in general, nothing major on the bore, so it should be able to be bored by the machine shop when we get there fairly easy. Tank came right off. There was a stud, a couple bolts, disconnected the fuel line. I'm going to go ahead and just take the bolts off, get the carburetor, get all this stuff out of the way, and take the magneto off, because the magneto's got to get has to get all gone through, as you can tell too. Got my VinsRJ bucket to start throwing the bolts and crap into, and then the rest of these parts here, like I'm not even going to use that gas tank, but all these parts I'm going to put on the shelf in the back of the garage, and I'll get to it when I get to it. Talk about a petrified cork gasket. I mean, this thing, let's see what we got. This is like what Al Capone's vault here. Let's see what we got going on in there. Doesn't look bad at all, actually, at first glance. Let me take off my, excuse me again. Whoop. Trying to take off my glove here while we do this. I know that was real professional, but that actually doesn't look bad. A little bit of moisture rust, condensation rust, but nothing big. The lifters look fine. The valves go up and down, so that's the reason why one's compressed. But overall, can't complain about that. All right. And as you can see, I got the mag off. The inside of the block looks great. Got the intake port, looks fine. You know, so it's real crusty and nasty, but in general, it's not bad. So I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to take, actually, I need to document this. This is the throttle setup for it, and that's the governor arm. I just want to document this for myself so that way I know which way it goes back together when we get ready to reassemble it. All right, I'm going to keep tearing down. Alrighty then, as you can see, there's oil everywhere. I'm not a Wisconsin expert by any stretch of the imagination, seeing that this is the first Wisconsin engine I've ever torn apart. But one thing I've learned, and you know, learning as I go, none of the holes in the block are blind. They all go into the block. They all have oil. Like these are the bolt holes that held the bell housing on. Well, I learned the hard way that those are not blind. They bleed oil when you tip the engine up. This is where the throttle was bolted in, and that one's not blind either. That one goes right into the block too. So you learn something new every single day, right? And of course, I stepped in it and I'm walking around, but all right, so far we got the mag off, 2 bolts, no big deal. Head tin carburetor, no big deal, couple bolts. We looked inside the lifter area, so the cover's off. There's the throttle, we're good all there. Gas tank is off, that's right over there, we're good there. Flywheel, yeah. This is appearing to be a challenge. Now, every once in a while, I'll say there's a stupid design or something. This blower cover is a stupid design. You got to get the flywheel off in order to get the main blower cover off the motor. Yeah, that's a dumb design. Now, the big rope start that was on the front of the motor right here, that came right off. I remember taking that off. I just had a big adjustable wrench, whacked it with the dead blow hammer, and it came right off. I was thinking conversely that this flywheel would come off the tapered shaft, you know, fairly easy. No bueno. I have not been able to get that thing to even budge, so I'm going to have to call it a night for now, rethink this, look at the manual, and take it from there. And once we get that flywheel off, we get the blower cover off, and then we can actually dive into the motor. In full transparency, I've had a hell of a fight with this flywheel. Now, if you're familiar with the Wisconsin manual, the way they say to take the flywheel off is to grab it like this, okay, and pull with your fingers, and then whack the end of the crank with a hammer. Yeah, that's just stupid. But I tried it. I tried it multiple times. I didn't really want to whack on the end of the crank very hard. So, and as you can see, it was a fail. The next thing I did was I took a tire spoon actually and slid it down between, because you can't get the blower cover off with the flywheel on. I slid it down right in between the flywheel and the blower cover and jammed it in there to put a little bit of pressure on the flywheel and whack it on the end. That it laughed at me. That wasn't going to work either. As you can see, it's fairly clean, so it's just on there. It's not like it's rusted into place. I've put WD-40 on this area. Not that that's going to particularly help, but I said, what the hell, right? The next thing I did was I went down to Harbor Freight and I bought a 3-jaw puller, and I just modified the ends of it with the grinder. And I'm going to go into these holes, put the puller on. And hopefully, I'm going to heat this up with the torch a little bit, and hopefully I can put enough even pulling pressure through the 3 holes that we can get this thing to break free. I am happy to say that my homemade gear puller worked. I did have to hit it a little bit with the hammer, and I did hit the center with my MAP gas torch. I didn't go bananas, okay? I just heated it up enough where you couldn't touch it, you know what I mean? And then nothing moved. But then I said, well, let me see about this nut. And I went, boy, this thing is super loose. And that's when I noticed the flywheel is coming off. Oh, lifesaver. and I'll tell you why in just a second. I'm going to go ahead, loosen this all up, get this gear puller out of the way, get the flywheel out, and get the blower cover off. With the flywheel completely off, let's take a look at what we got inside here before I go any further. The reason for that is I just wanted to show my WD-40 I sprayed over the course of a couple nights. That actually did penetrate all the way. You can see it right there. I mean, it did penetrate, which is really interesting. I didn't think it would. I knew it went down through the keyway area, but I did not think it was going to go, like, you know, where the press fit is. But really cool. Can't complain. Got two. It looks like we got some socket head screws here on either side on the bottom. That's what holds this blower cover in place. So I'm going to go ahead and get those two screws out, get this blower cover out of the way, and then oil pan. We'll get it up on the workbench and we'll get the oil pan off it. Like most of the engines on my channel, this one is of no exception. You know, this is a clear case of when people just get tired of, you know, the tractor might have been faltering or whatever, right? And they just let the whole thing go to heck in a handbasket. We got a ridiculous amount of dirt and oil and bug larvae. You can see this seal must have been leaking, you know, gently for years. Look at the amount of dirt that's surrounding that. I mean, the fins are all filled in, and this is a 13 fin block. You know, once you start doing this, that's it. Engine's over. You know, it's just going to overheat. So overall, the engine's not in bad shape. It's in really good shape. The bore's in good shape. Valves look fine. This is that old girl. Trying to get this thing out is going to be a chore. I think I got to drop the engine off to get bored. So I'll probably have this taken out by the machine shop. But let's go ahead. Let's get it. I'm going to clean it all up, get the bulk of the dirt and crap off it, and I'll get it up on the workbench, and we'll pull the oil pan off and take a look inside. All right. Well, I think I'm going to call it a day. I have smashed my thumb pretty good. Doesn't look it, but man, does it really hurt. And I smashed it trying to get this stupid Woodruff key out of the crank. This thing just would not budge. I put heat to it. I've gripped it with the vice grips, tried to tap it out. I've taken a punch and beaten the crap out of it. So basically I've ruined this Woodruff key, but whatever, moving on. I'm quitting. I'm stopping right now, because if I go any further, I'm just going to take a hacksaw or a sawzall and cut the end of the crank off, because I'm that pissed. I went ahead. You've seen me do this 100 times. I just removed the two rod bolts and then push the piston and the rod out of the bore. And then right here goes an oil pump. Pretty simple, just 2 1/4 20 screws, or maybe they're 5/16. I don't know. But, you know, just to get that out of the way. Overall, the crank looks pretty good. There are some light scores in the crank, but you can see that this thing has not run or had oil splashed around in it in a very, very long time. Whether or not this rust here on this gear will become an issue, I don't know. In general, I want to get the crank out, take a look at it, mic it up and all that stuff. But the part number for this crank in a senior is CA48-C, or I think that's the general part number. I didn't see there is EOJ on this side of the crank, and if I go ahead and spin it, there is a 29. Yes, a 29 on that side. So, but you can see there's some light scores. If I take my nail, you can just barely feel them with my nail. So as long as this thing mics up good, I'm just going to reuse this crank. I'll just clean it up and make sure it's all good. Everything outside is good. Everything inside is good. The rod and the piston are okay. And this is what I'll show you in a second. The rings are worn down real good. So this is, standard bore, standard rod. The thing that was interesting is there's these little thin shims on either rod bolt. Wisconsin guys, if there's one out there, Can you explain in the comments section what that is or what those were for? Obviously, the space out the end of the rod on the crank, I would say, bigger, right? Not smaller, but bigger. Interesting. Just never saw that together. Saw that in the past with other engines. And the thing of engine, there's a pit hole in the center right there. Not this. That's the oil hole, but that right there. There's like a pit right in the center of the rod cap. Very interesting. Man, my thumb is absolutely freaking killing me right now. But moving on. And then, just various nuts, bolts. That's all. And then the oil pan bolts. The oil pan is, the oil pan's right here. Let me get this little tool right here. Look at this. Oh, yeah. That is a good one. And this is why I always tell people when you start up an old engine and it runs great. Oh, yeah. I always tell them you should really pull that oil pan and clean the sludge out of the bottom of it. So, a bunch of work needed to be done here. A lot of more examination, but that's for another video. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any tidbits, some insights on any of this stuff, because this is the first time I've ever worked on a Wisconsin engine, please leave a comment below. And as always, until the next time I try to frustrate myself, you have a great day.